And we are live on Facebook, friends. So we've got today the Business of Beer Distilling Profits with Mr. Larry Anfin, retired CEO of Miller Coors here, right here in our hometown of Fort Worth. Larry's going to talk to us about the business of beer, the evolution of beer. And now, we see beer not only as an end product, but as an ingredient in other foods, which is very interesting, creating new products and product lines. We'll get Larry's take. What does he think about the pickle beer? And what would his grandfather think, the beer purist? What would he think about pickle flavored beer? You'll find out in a few minutes what Larry's taking. What's Larry's favorite beer? They'll share that with us too. Also, it's interesting. You see one generation start a business and then they pass it on to the second generation. And when the third generation gets it, the odds of it not continuing are disproportionately high. And we'll talk about why that is, why third generation businesses, especially family businesses, tend to struggle, some of the pitfalls and the challenges. Because if you look at the data, it has a very high failure rate, that third generation. So we'll talk about if you're interested in family business, general business, or just plain beer and alcohol, we've got the man behind all of that knowledge and institutional wisdom, Mr. Larry Anfin here. We've also got his lovely wife who will keep him honest. Karen, we count on you to keep your husband honest here, because Larry likes to talk about him. So if you know Larry, you will know he's like the P.T. Barnum of beer here in Fort Worth. He is the self-promoter, always talking about himself. And so we're going to see if we can get him to talk about other people. I'm being facetious, of course. Larry is one of the most modest and humblest men you will ever meet. And so, when we had the idea of doing this and featuring Larry, because he's fascinating. His story is fascinating. What he does in the community is fascinating. And so Courtney and Bruce and I, we thought, would Larry talk about himself for an hour? And so this is going to be Larry, we're going to challenge you here to talk about yourself. So the rule is, Larry, if you are too modest, I've got some pictures here, and I even have a profile video that they did of you and Karen. So if you're being too modest, then I'm afraid we're gonna have to roll that video. So we're gonna see if we can keep you as honest as we can. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
And Larry's a man of few words, and that's why we love him and appreciate him here. So folks, it's 8:30. We are so glad that you're here. I see our friends. I see Rob Francis from the Business Press has joined us. And we're going to push the limits of Zoom technology this morning. And how many of you were on a Zoom call yesterday? Raise your hand. If you were on a Zoom call yesterday, okay, just about everybody. When you share a screen, it kind of messes up your whole desktop and it shifts things around. So we're going to try to not share a screen, but we're going to show you pictures, and we'll do it in a kind of a unique way here today as we push the limits of our high-tech crew in the background. So welcome everyone. It's officially 8:30. Welcome to our Stories from the Stage. This is our third virtual install. Is this our third or fourth virtual installment, Courtney? It seems this is number 4. We had our conversation with Mayor Price live from City Hall last time, and we have our 4th installment today. Again, when we talk about the stage, it's obviously the virtual stage. The initial intent was to do this from the stage at Locavore Event Center, located in Fort Worth's historic South Side. Of course, with the pandemic starting in March, we were just getting ready to pull the trigger, and we decided to do it virtual. So we hope to transition back to in-person and maybe keep it virtual, but thank you for joining us. We like to take this opportunity just to highlight great things that are happening here in the community or important topics. And we, of course, could not do this without the generous sponsorship of Jay Taylor and Locavore and the Fort Worth Business Press. So to get us started, we have our presenting sponsor. We have Ms. Sarah Caldwell from Jay Taylor. And so, Sarah, thank you for being a generous sponsor. Could you feel free to unmute and just tell us a little bit about Jay Taylor and why you decided to sponsor this conversation series?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Caldwell. I'm a tax partner at Jay Taylor. That means we're a full-service accounting firm in Fort Worth. We provide tax, bookkeeping, audit, and business consulting services. We're thrilled to be able to sponsor Stories from the Stage. We feel like it enables us to connect with our city in ways we may not have before. And Courtney Gumbleton, Carvel Kapua, and Bruce Raven have done an amazing job, creating this series from nothing. and keeping it going during these challenging times. We also appreciate Larry Anfin for joining us this morning. So thank you all, and back to you, Carlo.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, we really appreciate your sponsorship for this. And also, I'm going to throw it to our my business partner in Locavore, Ms. Courtney Gumbleton, just to thank her. And do you want to say just a few words about what Locavore is and kind of how you're helping during the pandemic?
Sure. Thanks so much. So locavore, it means to eat local. It's kind of a play on carnivore. And we are a commercial kitchen incubator. So kind of think about eggs in an incubator trying to hatch. So what we do is help food businesses grow. So that's anything from somebody who maybe makes pies from home and sells them at a farmer's market, and they want to start selling at a retail shop. Well, that means that they would need to produce their pies in a commercial kitchen. That's where we come in. We work with caterers, food trucks, meal prep, I mean, really anybody who cooks. And our headquarters location at the Bastion on Hawthorne, it actually is the original Edna Gladney Adoption Center schoolhouse. And so Carlo and I have updated the space a little bit and turned it into a funky, cool event venue for intimate events. So if you know anybody for micro weddings or baby showers, bridal showers that are intimate, it's a great location. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Courtney. And hopefully we'll get to the stage from the stories from the stage here very, very soon. And just our thoughts and prayers go out to all of you out there watching who may have been affected, whether it's personally or professionally, by the pandemic. And hopefully this is a chance to be a distraction to focus on the good news, since we see so much bad news on either in print or on TV. It's good to have some feel-good stories and folks like Larry Anfin. I'd like to thank our other sponsor, our media sponsor, and that is the Fort Worth Business Press. We have Mr. Robert Francis. Thank you, Bob, for everything that you do to create those awesome ads, both digital and in print, to help promote what we're doing here and promote the great things happening in our community. So we really appreciate that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now it's time for the man of the hour. And we thought about how to introduce a man like Larry Anfin, and we thought it would be best because Larry is very modest. You ask, one thing people love about Larry is you ask him a long question and he gives you the shortest answer. I mean, he is the most word efficient person I think I know, which is why people love him, because he's a philanthropist, he's an entrepreneur, but all in all, he's a humble guy. And that's why he's been so embraced by the community. So I thought what we would do is have a little fun here. So Larry, what I'm gonna do is, in testing the limits of Zoom technology here, I've got a series of photos. It's going to be kind of like, remember that old show, This Is Your Life, where people show pictures and have interviews? Well, we didn't have any time for interviews, so we're going to go with the pictures here. We're going to put up some pictures here, and then Larry, maybe you can just kind of talk about it, why it's important, or key folks in your life. Tell me about this person, John V. McMillan.
Okay, first, that was my grandfather, and I got to work for him for 40 years almost. And he was a Jack's beer distributor. He come from Houston. He worked for Coca-Cola, and he and his partner Ed Curtis had an opportunity to get the Jack's beer distributor in Dallas. So they had that for a few years, and then he acquired Fort Worth. Well, Ed stayed in Dallas, and John moved to Fort Worth. So that's how our family come to Fort Worth. So Mr. McMillan goes on a business trip one time, goes to this bar in New Mexico. Everybody at this bar is drinking Coors beer. Every single person. So he asks the bartender, he goes, "Do you not sell any other beers here?" And they go, "Yeah, we sell all these beers." He said, "But the only thing we sell is Coors." So he goes to Las Vegas and he sees the same scenario. So he gets on the phone with his partner. He goes, "Ed, I don't know what this stuff is, we got to try to get it." So for 11 years, he went every year to Golden, Colorado and talked to Adolph Coors Jr. and said, "Whenever you move to Texas, we would like to be your distributor for Fort Worth." So fast forward to 1966, whenever they're making their choice, he and Ed wanted Dallas. They had 1,500 applicants for Dallas. They had 1,200 for Fort Worth. That's how popular Coors was. They didn't get Dallas, but Bob Eake announced to him, John, I'm sorry you didn't get Dallas, but would you accept being the distributor in Fort Worth? And he did. So on August 5th, 1966, they started Coors distributing in Fort Worth. And then we went through 2014.
So did your grandfather, did John V. McMillan, I mean, was he an avid beer drinker? Was he interested in beer? Why of all, and what did he do before he got into the beer industry?
Well, okay, so you look at that generation, he lived through the Depression, started working at 15 to help his family, money. Didn't serve in World War II, he had flat feet. At the time, you had flat feet, you couldn't go to be in the military, so he didn't go into the military, but he worked for Coca-Cola, started a chain of convenience stores, worked concessions at Huntsville at the prison rodeo. He must have worked 24 hours a day. He started with nothing and got that Jack's Beer Distributor, made a little money, and then when he got Coors, he made a lot of money. So it was, he was a self-made guy, and sometimes you don't appreciate how hard they work because you didn't see it, and then you get used to people being, I always saw him as, he was always successful, but he never talked about what he did either, really. I mean, he would, but he wouldn't. And so you didn't really appreciate when you're a younger person what all he accomplished and how great a person he really was till you get a little bit older. Then you figure, he's a pretty good guy.
So you mentioned your grandfather started working when he was 15 years old. What a coincidence that 2 generations later, you yourself would start working at the recycling plant at Coors at age 14. So a 14-year-old boy around beer, I mean, yeah, what could go wrong, right? Tell us, what was that like? I mean, working, obviously you're underage, but did you get to drink? I mean, were people in your generation, were you drinking? What were you doing? What was it like to be around that much beer from such a young age?
Okay, first our recycling, we were at 509 East Northside Drive. That was our warehouse. It's the 4th Independent School District, does cafeteria food there now. And we used to average 7,000 pounds a day of aluminum cans, Monday through Friday, and my dad would bring us to work at 5:30. We'd open the lot up at about 7, and then we'd get off at 3 or 4. But we didn't really drink beer when we were kids. I mean, we worked in recycling. Coors were asked you to have a recycling part of your distributor because Bill Coors developed the aluminum beverage can. Actually, he came up with the process for a 2-piece aluminum beverage can and changed the whole industry, going from steel to an aluminum can. So he wanted his distributors to recycle. And at the time I started, it was 10 cents a pound, and when I started, we moved to 15 cents a pound. And we did the recycling for years, but if you don't process your own aluminum, you don't really you can't be competitive on price. So competitors kind of outprice us in the market. And so we got out of recycling probably in the early 80s. But, recycling is not a good thing to have in your warehouse. They bring a lot of pests along with them with those recycled cans. You really have to keep things clean and all that. It's not a good thing for a beer distributor to have a recycling deal in their deal like that. So it was better that we didn't have it. So
at what point did you shift from recycling? What was your first step or your next position that put you one step closer to the actual beer being made?
Well, no, actually, we just distributed, Carlo. We didn't produce beer. We distributed it. It's a 3-tier system. It's the supplier produces it, the distributor sells it, and the retailer sells it to the consumer. I actually started on beer truck the day after my 18th birthday, which I wasn't really good at it because I weighed about 150 pounds. I wasn't really strong. First day we sold 780 cases out in Rendon, and I just barely made it. So next day, I started on a Thursday, and Friday, I thought, well, I don't know if I really want to do this. It took me about a month or 2, and I finally got to where I got kind of used to it. But it was hard work, and didn't have any air conditioning in our trucks. Didn't have any radios in trucks, old 8-bay trucks. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but I did that for a few years.
So you mentioned the actual beer can. So what I'd like to do is show, we've got the evolution of the beer can here. And Larry, could you talk a little bit about what you saw? You know, here's a sample of some Coors cans from old, obviously from the 50s all the way up to present day. Tell us a little bit about each can, like what made the cans different, and were they heavier or durable, or, and we'll talk about the pop tops in a second too, but tell us a little something that maybe the average person wouldn't know about beer cans over the years.
Okay. Well, you'll probably start with aluminum can whenever you put the picture up there. Bill Coors developed that process, and it was in a 7-ounce can, which at the time we couldn't sell in Texas. We could only sell 12-ounce, 24-ounce, 32-ounce, quarter barrel, half barrel. Then they changed laws in Texas where you could sell all the pages. That made for a lot more pages to handle. It wasn't really a great thing, but so the 7-ounce can, he didn't know how stable the product was in that aluminum can, so they used to ask people to refrigerate it. And so that's how refrigerated marketing come for Coors, because then it was from brewery, it was kept cold, and it was on the rail car insulated, and then our trucks were insulated, and we tried to put it in refrigeration at the retailer. But to sell beer, you need to have displays on the floor. So we had to adapt, and we slowly got to where we started building displays. We used to try to keep it, you had it all in the refrigerated box by Monday morning after the weekend. So, okay, you're muted.
Sorry, how did the evolution of the pop tops? I'm going to show another picture here. You know, those of you that were born, well, you know, anyway, some of you probably have never seen the way that pop tops used to be. Why was that significant, Larry? And kind of walk us through what you saw from the left to the right in that picture.
Okay, well, actually, before cans were self-opening, bottles outsold cans in the United States by a pretty good margin, too. And Iron City came out with what they called I think they called it zip top, or it was a tab top a little bit off to the side. And it was a good deal. And then they came out with ring pulls. I don't have to tell you ring pulls. People complained about the litter and stuff. So then your stay tab technology came into place that we have today. Well, unfortunately, though, Bill Coors wanted to be a little ahead of his time. I don't know if you remember Press Tab 2, but it was a triangular looking opening, and you push with your thumb on one side, the other side, and folded it in. That was the worst top in the history of the beverage industry. We had more damage, and customers complained about that page, and we had it for about 6 months. And it was probably the worst 6 months of being on a beer truck you'd ever want to live through. And then the stay tab technology is so much better. But those cans, you'd stack a dolly load of beer, and the can would open and reseal itself. So then people would get a flat beer. Oh, it was awful. But one time, and I don't remember the man's name on Channel 4, he did a news story on my grandfather. And so John is really talking highly about the page, and they show him trying to open the can, and he couldn't open it. And so the guy has a chainsaw and going like he's going to open the can, but he told him he wasn't going to put that in the segment, but he did. When he couldn't open it, he was sitting there pushing. He goes, he's easy to open. He couldn't open the can. It was pretty funny.
When we talk about, you know, I kind of teased about the third generation of business, and why do you think that is, Larry? That I mean, statistics show that the third generation of a family business has a disproportionately high failure rate. Mm-hmm. You know, talk about like inheriting that through your father to you, and then why do you think the failure rate is different from second to third generation?
That's honestly an easy answer, because your third generation, you didn't see how it started, and you don't appreciate the processes that are in place. You think you know more than the person that started it, which most time you really don't. You think you do, but you really don't. And then you have more people involved too. By the time you get third generation, you've got probably more family members involved in the process too. And it's, when 1 or 2 people are making a decision, it's a little easier than when 8 or 9 are. Then sometimes people want to change, sometimes they don't. I mean, if you've done something in the past, you maybe not need to do it so much in the future, but then sometimes you can't get past that. sometimes the industry changes and maybe you just can't keep up with it or you can't adapt to it. It's like if we tried to add robotics to the warehouse we had, we would literally had to tear the building down and start over again because you got to build taller ceilings and such. So, yeah, there's a number of reasons why, but beer business is a great business to be in, though, if anybody ever has a chance. So,
Talk to us, you know, when you think about lessons learned from your grandfather through your father to you, how do you balance honoring tradition with evolving and maybe making some changes that were at the fabric of how your grandfather started it? Can you tell us any stories about, obviously, you saw the evolution of technology, of ingredients, of automation. What were those decisions like, having to make those, knowing that your grandfather started it with a certain kind of direction in mind way back when?
well, this is a long time ago, but we didn't used to discount beer. We sold full price every day, all day. It was like utopia. And the other beer companies decided they wanted to start discounting product. And my grandfather was opposed to that. We didn't discount. We went 2 or 3 years. Everybody else discounted their product to retailers and we didn't. And we took a big hit on it. I mean, on sales, because we couldn't be competitive. Nobody would run us on sale. We couldn't get any ad activity. And looking back, we probably should have talked them into doing it a little sooner, but we didn't. I mean, we lost quite a bit of market share due to it. And then there again, too, in the beer industry, if you have dry territories, which a lot of Texas was dry years ago, we covered Tarrant Johnson County. Well, we had areas go wet outside our area, so those customers wouldn't drive into our area to buy the beer anymore. They would buy them in the areas that existed. And so in a 10-year period, we lost 1 million cases in sales from areas going wet around us. Grand Prairie, Roanoke, Duncanville, Hudson Oaks. I mean, we would lose. So you have to adapt to that too. And Grand Prairie went wet, we lost 500,000 cases. And we had to cut 2 pre-sale routes immediately. And then we had an Arlington facility on Avenue E over there, and we had to sell that because we didn't need it anymore. I mean, we didn't need the storage, so we combined our 2 operations. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But
So, which brings me to doing what you got to do. Sometimes, you know, Sun Tzu said a long time ago in The Art of War, know thy enemy, right? And so your enemy well, you had 2 enemies, right? Miller and Budweiser, and with Coors made up the big 3. So how did it feel seeing Miller, your greatest foe, and Coors partner together to form Miller Coors? Why did you make that decision, and what was the culture like combining those 2 former fierce rivals into one company?
okay, well, first, we didn't have any part in that decision. That was the suppliers did that. You know, and I told you earlier, the strangest thing I ever saw when Jack Jackson took us through the Miller Brewery in Fort Worth, and we're taking the tour, and we look up and there's Coors Light running off the line at the Miller Brewery in Fort Worth. It was a culture shock to me. Because Golden, Colorado was where we got our beer. And, but you know, at the time though, it was a joint venture. You know, they didn't merge. They did a joint venture. Miller, of course, was the biggest of the 2, so they had a little more control. But if you look at it now, it's Molson Coors. When Budweiser and Miller combined in the world, they had to sell off the United States part of it. So actually, Coors got the breweries and everything out of that deal. So it's kind of interesting the smaller guy kind of won out in that deal. But, you know, you look at it, I mean, when Coors, you had more breweries to get product from. And to us as a distributor, it was great because instead of getting rail cars, we could get trucks. And one guy can unload maybe 3 or 4 rail cars in a day if they're lucky. One guy can unload 30 trucks of beer. No problem. And that's 10 rail cars of beer. So it was so much more efficient. We had no damage on trucks. We would have damage on rail cars because they shipped them 800 miles. They got switched and stuff, so you would have damage, and it was hard to get in them with the forklift. And they use slip sheets. I don't know if you've ever seen a slip sheet, but don't ever sell product on a slip sheet. A pallet's the only way to go. Slip sheets just, we used to say there were 4 major enemies of beer: heat, light, age, and forklift drivers. And but trucks were, that part was so great for us because we could get product when we needed it, on time, no damage. So the Miller thing was great to us in that aspect.
So I'm going to read a report that was from a news article back in 2014. All right, I'd like to hear your thoughts. After 48 years as a family business operating in Tarrant and Johnson counties, Anfin, who was CEO, and his 3 brothers sold to Dallas-based Andrews Distributing of North Texas in March 2014. What do you think of when you hear that news report now, 6 years later?
Well, it sounds a little different. First, to begin with, Barry Andrews is a great distributor. He runs a great company. And Barry was also one that started with little of nothing and worked his way to being a very successful individual. And he's probably one of the nicest guys you'd ever meet. Seldom talks about what he's accomplished, appreciates what he has. So if you're going to sell to anybody, he was a good person to sell to. Of course, they built that new warehouse over on Blue Mountain Road. I haven't gotten to take a tour of it, but it must be incredible. But Sean Murphy, I actually met him in SMS training 30 so years ago, and he said if you drive from one end of their warehouse to the other, it's a quarter of a mile down the access road. 36 acres, and it has to be so much better for them to run out of that facility. I mean, but no, it's not bad now. But the hardest part I had on the transition is, when you're in groups and people go, okay, let's everybody introduce themselves and tell what you do. And for 40 years, I'd always said, Larry Anfin, I'm with Cruiser Streaming Company, and my short deal is we sell beer. I didn't do the insurance deal like we did 100 different things. Well, after that, I didn't have that to say, and it was really strange it still is, honestly. My wife and I have some properties and stuff now, but it's different not being the Coors guys.
So take us through, what did it feel like to sign on the dotted line that you were selling, and was it like seeing your baby go off to college? I mean, what did it feel like with you and your wife signing that and knowing that you were selling probably forever?
Well, okay, first remember, we did get some money out of it, so it wasn't really a horrible thing. Let's not fool ourselves. It's not like we went, we had to go sell our house or anything. It was okay. So, and of course you have to remember, I have 3 brothers too, so there's 4 of us. So actually it was good for all 4 of us. And it's kind of, they say some deals you can't refuse. We didn't refuse. So. But no, it was, don't get me wrong, it was, and you ought to sign the checks to the IRS if you wanted to have a real culture shock, because that was even worse than signing the papers to sell the distributor. So, and then they leased our warehouse from us, so we got some revenue from that and bought our trucks and everything else. So it was a good thing all the way around, but it was a little difficult there for a while. But
so what's it like having spare time? I mean, how do you fill your time now that you're not technically going into the office anymore?
Well, first, my wife and I bought our old warehouse back from my brother, so we own the building at 2550 McMillan Parkway. We were going to make a special events center out of it, but fortunately, we decided not to do that. So we dodged that bullet because we would have been open the first part of this year, so that would not have been good. So we pivoted, and we actually have 3 tenants in this building, plus we have some office space here too. So we're actually making a little money out of it, so that's a good thing. And then the nonprofits we were involved in, when I worked for Coors, we kind of stayed on, and I'm on a few of those boards and stuff. So that keeps me kind of busy, but it's different not going to work every day. So.
And you mentioned your lovely wife, and so if I can, I'll show just a picture of you and Karen. We know you, and I mean Larry and Karen. It's almost like Brad and Angelina, like Brangelina. Courtney calls you Laren because the two of you can often be found together at any event on the weekend that involves raising money. How did you take us way back? How did you guys meet? What did you think the moment you saw Karen? Did you know that that was the woman that you were going to marry?
Well, yes, and if you're looking for advice on how to get married the right way, we probably did it the completely wrong way. I met Karen on a blind date, asked her out a second time. 4 months later, we eloped to Las Vegas. I left work on a Friday, went to Las Vegas, we got married, and I came back to work Monday morning. And it's worked for 37 years, so.
What's been your secret to staying happily married?
I don't know if there's a secret to it so much. I just got lucky and picked the right one. That's.
Well, I know Karen is on. I'm not going to put her on the spot, but Karen, if you're interested, put a little something in the chat about Larry, about what you thought. Maybe what was one word you would use to describe Larry the first time you saw him? Put it in the chat there. We're all going to wait with bated breath as that happens. Now, Larry, what did your family think? I mean, you know, here you were the heir to this growing empire. I mean, did they think you were just going to sort of skip town and not take over the business?
No, they just knew I got married. I told my mom before I left, I said, I'm just letting you know we're going to elope. We're going to Las Vegas. And we left. Very few people knew it. And then we got back, and the Little White Chapel's where we got married. Actually, we got to Las Vegas and we looked in the phone book. You know, we used phone books back then. And they had a full page ad for Little White Chapel. And we go, okay, that's where we're going to get married. So limo picks us up, goes to get her dress at Imperial Palace back in the shopping center back there. I get my tux. We pick it up, go to the courthouse, get our license, drive back down to the chapel. They had a microphone hanging from the ceiling that they recorded it on. And James Terrell was our pastor, was the guy that married us. Actually lived in O'Donnell, Texas. The lady that was our photographer is also our witness. We got married, and the limo took us back to, it was Bally's. It was MGM Grand at the time, and it's Bally's now in Las Vegas. And so we went back home Monday, and it's lasted ever since.
So Larry, as you raised, you've got 4 children. What are some of the key characteristics, the key lessons from life, maybe that you've learned from your grandfather through your father and owning a family business? What are some of those core elements that you tried to really reinforce as you raised your 4 kids?
Well, for one thing, remember, I had 3 of my children working at the company before we sold it. So that was kind of a career changer for those 3. So it wasn't good for them that way. But, you know, actually, our 4 kids are real disciplined. They got a good work ethic. You know, they worked at, actually, my one daughter's in nursing school right now. She decided to go that route. My other son worked in graphics for us, and then my one son worked as a merchandiser. Actually, my oldest daughter worked there for a short time doing janitorial service, but she didn't really enjoy that job, so she decided to move on from that. So I don't know if I really taught them too much on instilling much of a work ethic. I mean, I tried, but they turned out all right, so I guess we did good.
Now, there's something very special that happened a few years ago on February the 16th. It was officially proclaimed Larry Anfin Day in Fort Worth. Larry, you got to give us some background, because if you don't tell the story, I'm going to really embellish on it, because I know you're very humble. How did Larry Anfin Day come about, and were you a part of that, making that happen?
No, I didn't know anything about it. So Karen takes and goes, she wants to go eat lunch. She goes, well, I want to go eat lunch downtown. I go, well, okay, I guess that's fine. So we're driving and we go downtown. So we park down on 2nd Street because there's no parking meters down that way. So we're walking through downtown. I thought, I don't understand why she's so hungry. I mean, you know, it was close to lunchtime, but I didn't think it was that big a deal. So we start walking down the street, and I look up and I kind of see this steel setting out in General War Square there, and I thought, well, I wonder what they're doing out there. And I didn't even know anything about it. And then mayor's there and Zimmerman and a bunch of other people and Downtown Inc. They made this banner with all these pictures of my face on it, which I've actually got that at the house. I saved it, but yeah, I was really surprised. I had no idea they were going to do it. Got a key to the city and all that. It was pretty awesome, actually. So.
And so this wasn't just a one-time thing, right? Because February 16th now, forevermore, like in perpetuity, will be known as Larry Anfin Day, right?
Well, it's a one-time deal, but it keeps getting celebrated on February 16th. So yeah, it seems like it's going on and on. But
so that begs the question: what does Karen Anfin do on Larry Anfin Day every year?
No, you'd have to ask her. I don't think she's too impressed by it, so I'm sure she's fine.
And then the follow-up question would be, what does Larry Anfin do on Larry Anfin? Like, do you just kind of get whatever you want? Like, do you got the key to the city? What do you do on Larry Anfin Day? Do you wake up and say, oh, today's Larry Anfin Day?
No, it depends on what day of the week it is. I don't know what I'm doing that day.
Okay, I've got some questions going back to beer. So let's look, so fast forward to now, right? And we see the pandemic has greatly changed the way we consume alcohol. I mean, they say alcohol sales at supermarkets are up. Obviously, bars are closed. Restaurants are limited. How do you see, and it all abruptly changed too, how do you see the future of how people consume alcohol having changed because of the pandemic?
Well, it's going to be very difficult on some of these on-premise accounts to reopen. And the off-premise, and off-premise is where you buy it and take it home with you. They're showing tremendous increases in the off-premise segment. Some of these on-premise guys aren't going to be able to come back. That's going to change probably the way you allocate your personnel. I mean, and then if you're a product like a craft beer that relies a lot on an off-premise account, you don't sell as much in the store, you've got a problem. Because if the on-premise doesn't come back, you don't have a place to really sell some beer. So if you were established well in the off-premise chain, you're doing well right now. And another thing that's kind of surprising to me is these seltzers. If somebody told me that seltzer would be selling what they're selling right now, they've got an unbelievable share, and they're showing triple-digit increases over triple-digit every year. And how they even came up with that segment, I don't know, but they're making tons of money on that stuff right now. It's pretty amazing.
Well, we see competition. I mean, craft beer over the past 10 years. Before 10 years ago, very few people had heard of craft beer. Now we're seeing it everywhere. So obviously, what used to be the big three, Miller, Coors, and Budweiser, are now faced with a lot of competition. What do you think when you see beer becoming more of an ingredient? Like, for example, we have with us Doug Renfro, and I'm going to spotlight this if you guys can see it. We've got a craft beer salsa that Mrs. Renfro's Food did. How do you see beer becoming more of a staple as an ingredient in other products?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know much about that, although I know he uses raw in that one version of his salsa. And we were actually the first distributor for raw, which is pretty cool because I think Fritz is in 10 states now with raw brewing company products, which is pretty cool. But yeah, that's actually a great product there. They use their amber ale, the Texas Red. It's very good. Well, of course, I know you know about the best-made pickle beer that Martin House is making and stuff. It does add some excitement to the deal, but I have to hand it to Brian Dalton. That's probably the greatest marketing for a little bit of no cost. I mean, he's getting more pub on that pickle beer because I think the third version came out, the Bloody Mary version, but it's actually a good product too.
So I've got to ask you this then. You know, your grandfather, John V. McMillan, was a beer purist, right? Down to the bone. How do you think he would react to seeing pickle juice in a beer or beer in pickle juice? Do you think that he would embrace that fusion and that change? Or do you think that he would be more of a traditionalist and just like his beer straight?
My grandfather's a great businessman. He was very loyal to Coors, but we took on Boston Beer Company, probably Sam Adams early on, I think in 82. We were one of the first distributors for Sam Adams in Texas. So, I mean, even though he was a beer purist, he knew you had to do what you had to do. And so, you know, not that he'd be enamored with a pickled beer, but, you know, if you make money on selling pickled beer, he'd be all over it. So, yeah, making money is an important thing. You do a lot of good things when you're making money. So.
Indeed it is. And if there's one other person on the call that knows about making money, it's Doug Renfro. Doug, I'm going to put you on the spot with that craft beer salsa you made. Why not tequila? Why not vodka? Why not some other type of alcohol? Why, in fact, was it beer that you chose to put into your famous salsa? I mean, wasn't it risky?
We actually had come out with tequila salsa 7 years before that. And it's delicious. It does okay. And I thought we had gotten into the seasonal aspect of things. We did a pumpkin salsa that comes out once a year. And we were thinking about stuff to do, and Fritz was chatting, and it's like, you know, a craft beer salsa using something brewed literally across I-35 from us might be fun. We said, it'll be cool. We'll have it for 60 days, see what happens. We took it to the San Francisco Fancy Food Show, which is an international event, and announced it's seasonal. There's no slotting available, no promotion. It's a Fort Worth beer. I didn't figure anybody would care nationally. Within the first 30 minutes, Kroger walks up and says, we want that in every store, 2,000 stores immediately. And we said, guess what? It's no longer seasonal. And yes, there is slotting available. And yes, there are promotions. And we have 30 Renpro SKUs, and craft beer is number 8. It's extremely strong. It's not going away. But to your point, to your question, I always believe it's better to be lucky than smart. And we try a lot of stuff. And the things that don't work, you walk away from. That one just went like gangbusters. And we got kind of lucky and executed. And Fritz is pretty happy too.
Well, Doug, you're also a third-generation business owner. And I know you have a story for anyone and everything. Tell us a story about Larry Anfin, maybe either the first time you met him or something funny or memorable that you might recall.
I think actually it was on the Tarrant Area Food Bank board.
Yep.
I was, my uncle was a founding member and knew everybody. I had come back from working for EDS after college in Dallas and Plano. I didn't know anybody, and I was honored to be put on the board and a little scared. And there was this guy that didn't say much, but everybody seemed to really respect. And I was like, who is that? And he wore a tie. It's like, man, I just got through wearing ties for 7 years. I'm done with that. And over time, I realized, what a wealth of wisdom, and also how amazingly philanthropic Larry is. There's been a lot of chat stream here. When he said he's on a few boards still, we think it's 39. We're not sure.
No.
And the earliest memory, you get these snapshot memories sometimes. And I do have a snapshot memory of sitting across from Larry at Food Bank board. And that was probably, we think 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
Well, you talk about Larry being, you mentioned Larry being involved. I'm going to spotlight, I don't know if you can see this, but I added, this is a snapshot of Larry's LinkedIn profile from maybe 3 years ago. And this isn't like, folks, this isn't a cumulative service on boards. This was a moment in time snapshot. Larry, do you remember how many boards you were on when Larry Anfin Day was proclaimed?
I'm actually on most of those still, but no, I don't.
You were on 21. You were on 21 boards at the same time for Larry Anfin. I mean, I don't know anybody other than maybe the mayor or the governor or a city councilman. Why is it important to be connected so closely in your community?
Okay, well, I'll go back to when we had our company. My grandfather, I know a lot of people don't, because he passed away in 2001, and unfortunately a lot of people didn't get to know him, but whatever I've done in the community, he did 10 times over. He was probably one of the greatest leaders and most philanthropic people. Didn't tell people what he did, just did it kind of people. Well, as he got older, he started having health issues. So then that kind of passed on to my mom. And she would do all that. And then I finally came to the realization that it was going to be my turn, that I need to do it. Well, of course, you all know I'm not real social butterfly. So it was a huge step out of my comfort zone to get involved in. So I started doing it. And then after a while, I thought, okay, I can do what I'd like. I can get on boards that I want to get on. I'm not building a resume. I don't have to do anything if I don't want to do it. And I thought, so I started getting involved with great organizations, and then I get to interact with people I wouldn't otherwise interact with. You'd see people at different deals. You'd never get a chance to talk to them, and you can sit right next to them. And I thought, okay, this is pretty cool. And, Fort Worth's a great community, and it was always good to us as a family. And you've got to give back. And you don't have to run the flag up the flagpole every time you do it, but, it doesn't hurt to just do things just to help people. I mean, why not? I mean, if you can do it and you're lucky enough to be in the position we're in, you should. So,
well, Larry, you just got a great compliment from a true leader in the community, as someone who has been a part of the print media industry for a long time here in Fort Worth. Bob Francis, who was one of our sponsors at the Fort Worth Business Press, he said, as a reporter, Larry being on so many boards was handy. I could call him and ask him questions about everything from beer to Stage West to Tarrant Area Food Bank in one call. How does that make you feel?
Well, actually, I have a lot of respect for Bob Francis. That's very nice of him to say.
And that was the long answer, folks. That was the long version of the answer.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Larry, you also, you're very involved in the stock show syndicate, and occasionally you will buy the Grand Champion, right? What does it feel like? What does it feel like buying the Grand Champion? And then what do you do? These Grand Champions, these are in six figures to buy a Grand Champion. How does it make you feel to be the winning bidder? But then more importantly, what do you do with that Grand Champion after you have the winning bid?
Okay. Well, first, it's fun while you're at the auction. It's not as much fun writing the check when the auction's over. But, actually, it's really, you're helping that kid out, which is a great thing. Now, you don't get to keep the steer. When we bought the steers we did, we donated to the Fort Worth Zoo, and it would stay out there for 6 months. And then somebody that had a ranch, which I do not have a ranch, would get the steer, and then it would live its life out. Yeah, they're not going to let us have a steer out in our backyard in Fort Worth, so I don't, we can keep them. But when you're doing things like that, you're actually helping a child out with his college education and such. And that's why we looked at it. And those auctions are pretty exciting, though. And God, this year, that was the best we did, $4.7 million. It was the most incredible auction of all time. I'd hate to be the chair that follows Trey after that.
Well, you mentioned giving back. Obviously it was built into your grandfather's DNA when he started the company, and it got passed down, obviously, to you. Always giving back. For folks who are maybe new to Fort Worth, or maybe someone graduated from college and getting their first job here who may not know many people, obviously your network is vast. What's the best tip to meet new people, either in Fort Worth or if you move to a new city? What advice would you give?
Okay, well, I'm a little prone to, first, I like the Rotary Club of Fort Worth. I think if you want to get in a good group where you can really get to meet people, that's a great place to go. And actually, Mitch Reitman, I went to high school with, asked me to be in Rotary. And at the time, Bob Bolin was active in Rotary. And so I go to Rotary, and I'm sitting there, and there's Bob Bolin sitting there. And I go, so Bob Bolin comes to Rotary? And he goes, yeah. I said, okay, well, we'll see. So the next time I went, I said, I want to be in Rotary. So, yeah, downtown Rotary is good. Fort Worth Club's actually a great place to get to know people. And then just being on boards in general, you don't have to be the best board member on a board. If you want to win Board Member of the Year, that's a great aspiration. But, just being a part of the deal, and you get to talk with other people in different industries, and you learn things from them. You get to see good things that happen in Fort Worth that you don't know about. That's a great way to get to know people too. And then it's always interesting, even people in different industries, you all have the same problems a lot of times. So, you can kind of interact with somebody and they've got the same issues, and you can find a way to deal with it, and you can bring it back with you. But, there's so many things you can do in Fort Worth. My gosh, it's a lot of things you can do to help.
So we're going to keep going a little bit deeper. And if you have a question for Larry, put it in the chat box and we'll get to a moderated Q&A in just a second. Larry, what's the best piece of advice that you ever got?
Well, one thing my grandfather said, don't build too many offices in your building because you'll find people to put in them. You know, and I thought, okay, well, then after a while, I thought, you know, you're right. If you do have an empty office, you do seem to find an employee to stick in that office. That was super good advice. You know, making sure you're watching details in the business, you know, just knowing every day what your inventory is and customer relations, you know, don't just take care of the customers, try to do extra, you know, that was always important. And then, of course, his quality was always such a forefront of Coors Brewing Company products. And we actually won the Platinum Award as a distributor for quality. We had 3 perfect audits in a row, and that was really hard to do because we had 3,000 accounts, and you're checking rotation on all 3,000 of them, and keeping all your product in date and stuff is very difficult to do. And so that, you know, his deal to quality, he passed that on to us.
If you hadn't gotten into the beer distribution business, what do you think you would have done?
I don't know. I was lucky. I had the opportunity to join that company. I don't know what I'd have done, honestly. I had no aspirations to do anything. But I like the beer business, so.
What's been the greatest change you've seen in Fort Worth in the 4 or 5 decades that you've lived here?
Downtown Fort Worth wasn't a great place 40 years ago. Downtown Fort Worth's a pretty nice place. Well, I mean, it's got to come back since the pandemic. There's not as many people coming down there, but yeah, downtown Fort Worth was not a great place a long time ago. And you look at the near south side. If somebody told me the near south side would be doing what they're doing now, I said, there's no way. Because there was, you know, you had John Peter Smith Hospital and that one little old liquor store that was in front of there. It used to get robbed, I think, 3 or 4 times a week. And yeah, it's just amazing the evolution of Fort Worth. And we've got so many elements we can sell to the city. And then you look at North Fort Worth, what Hillwood's done out there, just unbelievable. And we have the Motor Speedway and, you know, Stockyards is, look at what they've done out in the Stockyards now. And Fort Worth's not just one thing anymore. You got your cultural district and there's just so many elements the city has. It's great.
As we are, you know, in the middle of a pandemic right now, Larry, there are a lot of young folks graduating from school, trying to get a job or go into business. What advice might you have for them that the future may not be as bright as maybe they thought even a year ago coming out of school or trying to start their business?
I don't really have any advice for them. I'll be honest with you, I'd hate to be them. I don't know what I would do if I was a young person right now trying to figure out what to do. I mean, I really don't. I'm not sure what advice I would give to somebody like that. They're just gonna have to figure it out on their own. I mean, there's a lot smarter people than I am. I'm sure there's somebody that have an answer for them. I don't have an answer for that. I'd hate to be them though.
Well, Courtney, I'll throw it to you. Do we have any questions? I didn't see many questions in the chat, but let's do this. As you're looking for questions, anybody on the call, obviously Larry, you know, he's a philanthropist, he's an entrepreneur, Rotarian, husband, father. He wears a lot of hats, but after hearing his story today, type in what's one word, type it in the chat if you would. What's one word that you think describes Larry? Or what's one thing that you think after hearing Larry's story, what's one word that might come to mind? And as they're doing that, Larry, how would you like people to describe you? You know, philanthropist, volunteer, board member, how would you like most to be described by other people?
You know, also, I don't have a preference. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, you know, I actually don't have a preference on how they'd want to think of me. I try to do what's right. I guess that'd be a good thing to.
Well, I know you're humble, and so you're probably not going to want to read these. So I'll read them aloud so everyone can hear. Here are some one-word answers that we're getting to describe Larry Anfin. And these are from people who know you, which some are on the call, and some, I presume, had never met you or heard you talk. So I see selfless, inspirational, kind, genuine, dedicated, genuine, humble, legend, dedicated, true leader, generous. I think that was from your wife. Approachable, humble, modest, funny, and from our sponsor, Sarah, down to earth. And I think I think all of those are perfectly fitting for the Larry Anfin that we know in the media and on, print media, but the Larry Anfin that showed up today, who is the real, I can tell you, Larry, I've known you for almost 10 years. I know Doug's known you for way longer than that. And we are so fortunate to have a servant leader like you. We see on TV, you see folks in power or who are influential who never know how to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, give credit where credit is due. And you are sort of the total opposite of that. You are truly a role model and what I hope every business leader strives to become. Larry, any final parting thoughts for us? Anyone on Facebook or Zoom or someone that may watch this, find this video in 5 years and hear maybe some final thoughts from you?
No, this is probably the longest I've ever sat down and talked about myself forever. I'm not a really interesting guy. I kind of like to do things the way I like to do them. So, let me tell you though, I was very lucky to have the opportunity I did to be able to work for my grandfather, work at Coors Distributing. Not very few people have that opportunity. And you don't really appreciate it till you get a little bit older. And then you kind of sit there and think, wow, there's 1,000 people going to be sitting in this chair and I get to sit in it. So, sometimes it's kind of like Doug said, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And I think I was lucky, so.
Well, Larry, you really have been an inspiration to show what a true servant leader, volunteer heart, and just a generous spirit looks like here. And I wish we had more business leaders and just more citizens like you here in our community, in our country, and our world. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a virtual applause to our guest today, Mr. Larry Anfin.
Thank you.
And remember, on Larry Anfin Day, which is what, February, what's that date, Larry? Remind us, when is Larry Anfin Day?
I know what day it is. February 16th.
February 16th. So on February 16th, when you wake up, just remember, it is Larry Anfin Day, and go raise a glass of either Miller or Coors in his honor. Folks, I'd like to thank you for tuning into Stories of the Stage. We'd like again to thank our sponsors, and I'll spotlight them as I go through. So thank you to Sarah Caldwell at J. Taylor. Thank you so much to Courtney Gumbleton of Locavore. And thank you to let me see if I can find Bob Francis is so, boy, I tell you, he is tough to get. We're gonna I can't spotlight you because your video's not on. So anyway, a spotlight for Robert Francis. Thank you all so much. We are working on our next Stories from the Stage. We're hoping, well, I'll kind of keep it under wraps. We're hoping for a very, very special guest, either coming to you this fall or most likely next spring. If it is next spring, then we certainly hope to come to you from the actual stage at Locavore, where we can support some other food entrepreneurs and have them come in and give them some business. So for any of you who need to have somewhere nice to eat, please consider supporting a local small business. They have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. Please consider buying local, shopping local, supporting especially women and minority-owned businesses. That's something we try to do with Locavore, and with this is to promote other small businesses within our community. Again, thank you for joining us today. Again, thank you to Larry Anfin and all of our sponsors, and y'all have a great Thursday.
And Carlo, we can't forget to thank our newest sponsor, Doug Renfro. We will send you an invoice.
Doug, check your inbox. You have until tomorrow morning
salsa.
to make payment. You cannot pay in craft beer salsa. I know you, and I know you well. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.